As a black man worked on his farm, a distant cry of frustration shattered the quiet afternoon. Looking up, he spotted a woman standing beside a sleek but lifeless car on the road near his barn. Despite the sharp edge in her tone, he offered to help, easily fixing the car and inviting her to rest at the farm before continuing her journey. But he had no idea that this simple act of kindness would spark an opportunity that could change his life forever. The late afternoon sun hung low over Ashton Creek, stretching golden rays across the vast open fields. The summer air was thick with the scent of freshly cut hay, mingling with the earthy aroma of the soil that Darius Carter had tilled for years. He moved with steady, practiced ease, wiping the sweat from his brow as he secured the latch on the cattle pen. The day had been long, like most days, and his body ached in the way a man's body does when he's spent his whole life working the land. A deep sigh escaped his lips as he turned toward the house, already picturing Naomi inside, preparing supper. The thought of seeing his daughters rush toward him, their little feet kicking up dust in the evening light, brought a tired but contented smile to his face. He may not have had much, but he had them, and that was enough to keep him going. Then the sound came, sharp, distressed, cutting through the quiet hum of crickets and rustling leaves. "Damn it, come on, you piece of—" Darius looked toward the road bordering his property and saw her, a woman hunched over the hood of a silver sedan, hands bracing against the metal as if sheer frustration could will the car back to life. Even from a distance he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she yanked at her blazer as though the fabric itself was suffocating her. She looked out of place. City clothes, heels caked in dust. She wasn't supposed to be here. Instinct pulled him forward. He dusted off his hands and strode toward her, boots crunching against the gravel. The woman didn't notice him at first, too absorbed in the battle she was clearly losing with the engine. "You need some help, ma'am?" Darius called out. She whirled around, eyes flashing with irritation. Her face, sharp-featured, high cheekbones, dark eyes, was drawn tight with frustration. A few strands of hair had slipped from the bun at the nape of her neck, and a thin sheen of sweat glistened on her brow. "Does it look like I need help?" she snapped, before exhaling sharply, closing her eyes as if willing herself to calm down. Sorry, that was rude." She pressed a hand to her forehead, shaking her head. "I've been driving for hours. I have a meeting in the city in the morning, and now my car decides to break down in the middle of nowhere. The phone is out of battery." She let out a humorless laugh. "Fantastic timing, right?" Darius studied her. She looked exhausted, more than just physically. There was something else there, a weight behind her eyes that had nothing to do with a broken car. He'd seen it before, in his wife after long shifts, in himself after another month of barely making ends meet. "Let me take a look," he said. She blinked at him, eyes scanning him from head to toe, the worn-out overalls, the dirt-streaked arms, the calloused hands. "You're a farmer," she said, as if that explained everything. Darius smirked. "And?" Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment she seemed to debate whether to trust him, but then, maybe out of sheer desperation, she stepped aside. "Be my guest," she muttered. Darius leaned over the hood, glancing at the components with a mechanic's practiced eye. Years of fixing busted farm trucks had made him good at this. Machines spoke a language he understood. A few wires out of place, a loose connection, nothing major. "Try turning it over," he said after a few adjustments. She slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine sputtered once, then roared to life. She sucked in a breath, wide-eyed. "Oh my God." Darius straightened, wiping his hands on the back of his jeans. "I don't believe it," she murmured, stepping out of the car. "I thought I was going to be stuck here all night." She turned to him, something softer in her gaze now. "Thank you, really." Darius just nodded. He'd done what anyone would. Then he looked at her again, really looked at her. The tight grip she had on her arms. The way her shoulders hadn't quite relaxed even now. "You got a long way to go?" he asked. She let out a weary sigh. "Couple more hours, maybe more if traffic is bad." Darius glanced up at the sky. The sun was sinking, staining the clouds in deep shades of orange and violet. Driving at night, exhausted, in a car that had already given her trouble? He didn't like it. "You look dead on your feet," he said plainly. "Why don't you come inside for a bit? Rest up before you get back on the road." She blinked, clearly taken aback. "Oh, I don't want to intrude." "You ain't intruding," he said simply. "My wife's making supper. Bet she'd be real happy to have a guest." For a moment she hesitated, like the offer was too foreign to process. Then, finally, she nodded. "Okay. Yeah, that actually sounds nice." Darius gestured toward the house. "Come on, then." As they walked back toward the farm, the night settling in around them, Darius had no idea that this small act of kindness, this simple decision to offer rest to a stranger, would alter the course of his life forever. As the screen door creaked open, the scent of cornbread and slow-cooked stew drifted through the air, warm and inviting. The wooden floors beneath Samantha's heels groaned as she stepped inside, her tired eyes scanning the cozy, lived-in space. The farmhouse wasn't grand, but it had a quiet charm. Family pictures lined the walls, the furniture was well-worn but sturdy, and a quilt lay folded neatly over the arm of an old rocking chair in the corner. It was a home, a real one, the kind built on more than just walls. Naomi looked up from the stove, her dark curls pulled into a loose bun, an apron tied around her waist. Her deep brown eyes flicked between Darius and Samantha, reading the situation in a single glance. "Well now, who do we have here?" Naomi asked, a smile in her voice but curiosity in her gaze. "This here's Samantha," Darius said, stepping aside so Samantha could enter fully. "Car broke down near the road, figured she could use a meal before heading back out." Naomi wiped her hands on a kitchen towel and walked over, extending a hand. "Nice to meet you, Samantha. You came at a good time. Food's just about ready." Samantha hesitated, then took Naomi's hand, her own noticeably softer compared to the rough, hard-working grip that greeted her. "Thank you," she said, her voice lower now, almost unsure. "I really appreciate this." Naomi waved off the formality. "Honey, we don't let folks leave here hungry. Come on, sit down." Darius pulled out a chair at the long wooden table, motioning for Samantha to take a seat. As she sank into it, she exhaled slowly, as if only now allowing herself to feel the exhaustion in her bones. Darius sat across from her, his chair groaning under his weight, while Naomi set out steaming bowls of stew, a plate of cornbread, and a pitcher of sweet tea that gleamed with condensation. The first few bites were eaten in near silence, aside from the occasional clink of a spoon against ceramic. Samantha hadn't realized how hungry she was until now, and as she chewed, the tension in her shoulders eased slightly. It had been a long time since she'd had a home-cooked meal, longer still since she'd sat at a table that felt safe. Naomi leaned forward, resting her forearms on the table. "So, Samantha, what brings you out this way?" Samantha swallowed, setting her spoon down. "Business," she said vaguely. "Meetings, clients, the usual." Darius noted how she avoided specifics. There was a sharpness to the way she carried herself, a wall built carefully over years. She was someone used to being in control, someone who didn't like to owe anyone anything. Naomi, unfazed, smiled. "Well, you must be important, driving around in that fancy car." Samantha huffed a quiet laugh. "I don't know about important," she said, pushing a piece of cornbread through the last bit of stew in her bowl. "Just busy." "That ain't the same thing," Darius said, sipping his tea. Samantha's gaze flickered up to his, something unreadable in her expression. "No," she said after a pause, "I suppose it's not." Naomi changed the subject then, talking about the farm, the girls, the never-ending work that came with running a place like this. Samantha listened, interjecting here and there, but mostly she observed. The way Naomi and Darius worked in tandem, the way the house hummed with quiet strength, it was different from what she was used to. Her world was sleek, cold, polished offices, high-rise apartments, long hours with little sleep, but this was something else entirely. After dinner, Darius offered to show her around before she left. Samantha hesitated, but eventually agreed, stepping back into the cooling evening air. The farm stretched before them, the horizon painted in deep purples and burnt oranges. Fireflies flickered in the distance, their small lights winking like tiny beacons. They walked past the horse stables first. the scent of hay and earth thick in the air. Samantha hesitated at the fence, watching as a dark-coated horse nickered softly at their presence. "You name all of them?" she asked, her tone lighter now. "Of course," Darius said. "Their family." Samantha smirked. "And this one?" She nodded toward the horse closest to them. "Frederick," Naomi said from beside her. "He's got a temper, but he's a good boy." Samantha hesitated, then slowly reached out. The horse sniffed her palm before nudging against it, his warm breath fanning over her skin. A quiet laugh escaped her lips, something unguarded, almost childlike. Darius watched her closely. City folks didn't usually soften this fast. "You look like someone who ain't stopped to breathe in a long time," he said, his voice low but not unkind. Samantha's hand stilled on Frederick's muzzle. "I don't have time to stop," she said simply. Darius studied her a moment before replying. "Ain't nothing worth having that don't let you breathe." Samantha didn't respond. The night stretched around them, heavy but not suffocating. For the first time in a long time, Samantha didn't feel like she had to rush, didn't feel like she had to be anywhere other than where she was. She didn't know it yet, but this night, this quiet, unexpected stop in the middle of nowhere was about to change everything. As they continued walking through the farm, the night air settled around them, cool and laced with the scent of hay and damp earth. The moon had begun its slow ascent, casting silver streaks across the rolling fields. Samantha found herself unexpectedly at ease, her usual tension loosening with every quiet step. There was something about this place, about its stillness, its grounded simplicity, that made her feel strangely present. They reached the cattle pen, where a handful of cows stood lazily beneath the glow of an old barn light. Darius leaned against the fence, his arms folding over the top rail, his eyes scanning the animals like a man who knew every inch of them, every habit, every preference. "You name them too?" Samantha asked, tilting her head toward the cows. Darius let out a soft chuckle. "Of course I do. That one right there." He pointed to a large speckled cow near the gate. "Her name's Mabel. She's the stubborn one, always breaking out the pen thinking she runs the place." Samantha smirked, crossing her arms. "Mabel, huh?" "Yeah, and that big fellow over there." He nodded toward a broad-shouldered bull further back. "That's Solomon, real gentle, but you don't want to push your luck with him." Samantha glanced between the animals, then back at Darius. "You really see them as more than just livestock, don't you?" Darius met her gaze, his face unreadable for a moment before he shrugged. "They ain't just animals to me. They got their own ways, their own minds. They're a part of this place, same way my folks were, same way my girls are. You take care of something long enough, you learn it ain't just about you, it's about respect." Samantha didn't answer right away. She was watching him now, really watching. There was something deeply rooted in the way he spoke, the way his hands moved over the rough wood of the fence, the way his eyes lingered on the land as if it were a part of him. It wasn't just a job to him, not just a way to make a living. It was his identity, woven into his very being. "You love this place," she said finally, her voice quieter now. Darius exhaled through his nose, shaking his head with a small smile. "Yeah, I do, even when it's hard, even when I wonder how the hell I'm going to keep it running." That last part caught her attention. "You're struggling." It wasn't a question. Darius hesitated, then let out a low chuckle, rubbing the back of his neck. "Strugglin' might be putting it lightly." Samantha glanced around, taking in the worn-down fencing, the old equipment leaning against the side of the barn, the truck by the house that looked like it had seen one too many repairs. "How bad?" she asked. Darius sighed, straightening. "Bad enough that every month feels like a fight to keep the lights on. Bad enough that I wonder if one day I'm going to have to walk away from all this, after everything my folks built." The thought of that, of someone like him being forced to leave the land he clearly loved, struck something in her. She knew money, knew business, knew how the world worked, and she knew that men like Darius, the ones who worked themselves to the bone out of sheer determination, were often the ones left behind by a system that didn't care how much heart they put into what they did. You ever think about expanding, bringing in new revenue streams? She asked, shifting back into the mindset that had made her so successful in the first place. Darius gave her a look, one brow raised. That's some kind of fancy way of saying I should sell out? She smirked. Not sell out, but work smarter. There are ways to make what you do here more sustainable, more profitable. You've got something special, Darius. People in the city would pay good money for farm-to-table produce, for experiences. You just have to position yourself the right way. Darius let out a low hum, clearly skeptical. That why you're in business? Taking places like this and turning them into something they weren't meant to be? Samantha's lips pressed together. I help businesses grow. I don't take them away. Darius studied her for a moment, the way she held herself, the way her jaw tightened like she was used to defending herself. He didn't know much about the world she came from, but he knew enough to understand that it was nothing like his. That right? He murmured, pushing off the fence. She held his gaze. That's right. A long beat passed between them, then Darius let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. City folk, he muttered, half amused, half something else. Samantha smirked. Farmer. The tension in the air loosened just slightly, but something had shifted between them, something unspoken. Samantha had come here by accident, but now, as she looked around the farm, at Darius, at the life he had built brick by brick, she couldn't shake the feeling that maybe this wasn't just a stop on the road. Maybe it was something else entirely. Samantha felt something tighten in her chest, an unfamiliar ache that she didn't quite know how to name. She had spent her entire career helping businesses grow, advising companies on how to maximize profits, streamline operations, expand their reach. She had built her success on numbers, efficiency, bottom lines. But standing here in the quiet embrace of a farm that had seen generations of hands work its soil, she realized that some things weren't meant to be measured that way. She thought of her own life, of high-rise offices and hotel rooms that blurred together, of long hours and cold meetings, of expensive dinners that never quite filled her the way this simple meal had. She had spent years chasing success, but she wasn't sure she had ever stopped to ask herself what it was all for. She cleared her throat, suddenly uncomfortable with the direction of her own thoughts. So, what's stopping you from making things easier, expanding, modernizing? Darius let out a quiet chuckle, shaking his head. Money mostly. Takes cash to make changes, and I ain't exactly rolling in it. Bank don't like lending to folks like me, and I ain't about to drown in debt just to keep this place afloat. There it was, the harsh reality beneath the quiet dignity he carried. Samantha had seen it before, the way the system worked against people who didn't fit the mold of what a successful businessman was supposed to look like. She had sat in meetings where men in suits talked about numbers, never seeing the faces behind them. She exhaled, glancing at him. What if I could help? Darius turned to her fully now, his eyes narrowing slightly. Help how? She reached into her purse, pulling out a checkbook. I can give you what you need to get this place back on its feet. The air between them shifted instantly. Darius stiffened, his jaw locking, his entire demeanor changing in an instant. He looked down at the check in her hand like it was something dangerous, something offensive. No, he said flatly. Samantha frowned. Darius. I said no. His voice was firm, final. I ain't some charity case, and I damn sure ain't taking your money like I'm some lost cause. Her brows furrowed. That's not what this is about. You said it yourself. You're struggling. I have the means to help. Why wouldn't you take it? Darius took a slow step toward her, his expression darkening. Because that ain't how I was raised, he said, his voice low, steady. I help people 'cause it's the right thing to do, not 'cause I expect something in return, and I sure as hell ain't about to take a handout like I ain't worked for everything I got. Samantha felt heat rise in her chest, a mix of frustration and something else she couldn't quite place. Darius, this isn't about pride. This is about respect, he cut in, his gaze unwavering. For myself, for this land, for the people who came before me. I ain't about to let someone come in here, throw money at a problem, and act like that fixes everything. This farm ain't just something you patch up with a check, Samantha. It's bigger than that. Samantha stared at him, heart pounding. No one had ever turned her down like this. No one had ever looked at her and refused what she was offering, not out of arrogance, not out of stubbornness, but because they truly believed in something deeper than money. For the first time in a long time, she didn't know what to say. The night around them was thick with silence, the tension settling between them like a wall neither of them knew how to cross. Samantha clenched her jaw, inhaled and then slowly exhaled, tucking the checkbook back into her purse. "Okay," she said finally. "Then let me help a different way." Darius tilted his head slightly, eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" She crossed her arms. "You don't want a handout, fine, but what if I connected you with people who could actually help? Consultants, business strategists, people who could show you how to make this place thrive without losing what makes it special." Darius hesitated, his shoulders still tense. "It wouldn't be a gift," she added. "It would be a loan, one you could pay back on your own terms." For the first time since she pulled out that checkbook, Darius didn't look like he wanted to walk away. He didn't answer right away, but Samantha could see the wheels turning in his head, the battle between pride and logic. Finally, he exhaled through his nose, shaking his head with a small, reluctant chuckle. "You're a stubborn woman, you know that?" Samantha smirked. "So I've been told." He studied her a moment longer, then nodded once. "All right, we'll talk." A small smile pulled at the corner of her lips. Good. Neither of them knew it, yet, but that conversation, right there in the quiet dark of an old farm, was the start of something bigger than either of them had ever expected. The following week, just as the sun was cresting over the fields, Darius heard the unmistakable hum of approaching vehicles. He stepped out onto the porch, his brows furrowing as a sleek black SUV rolled down the dusty road leading to his farm. Naomi emerged beside him, drying her hands on a dish towel, her expression mirroring his confusion. Samantha stepped out first, wearing a navy jacket and jeans, looking every bit the city woman she had when she first arrived, but this time there was something different in her eyes, a certainty, a purpose. She walked over to shake hands with three men who had just gotten out of the car, a middle-aged man in wire-rimmed glasses, a younger woman holding a leather folder, and a man in his 50s with a thick southern drawl and a handshake that could crush rock. Darius's jaw tightened. He didn't like surprises, and he sure as hell didn't like feeling like a project. "What's all this?" Samantha approached with an easy smile, but there was steel behind it. "This," she said, gesturing behind her, "is my version of helping." Darius crossed his arms. Naomi stayed silent beside him, waiting. "These folks here," Samantha continued, "are agricultural consultants, business strategists. They work with independent farms, helping them expand, modernize, and most importantly, stay in business." Darius stiffened. His gut reaction was to say no, to shut it all down before it even started, but something in the way she looked at him made him pause. It wasn't pity, it wasn't condescension, it was belief. "I know you don't want a handout," she said, her voice quieter now. "So I found another way, a way that lets you keep control of your farm, your future, without feeling like you owe anyone anything." The man with the crushing handshake stepped forward. "Mr. Carter, name's Walter Briggs, been in the farming business for over 30 years. We've helped dozens of folks like yourself make a real go of it. Smarter investments, better financial planning, even securing grants. Not a dime of charity, just the tools you need to run things the way you want." Darius hesitated. He could feel Naomi's eyes on him, knew she was reading the tension in his shoulders, the battle waging in his mind. "We're not here to change your farm into something it's not," the woman with the portfolio added. "We're here to help you make it work for you." Darius exhaled slowly. This wasn't what he expected, and it wasn't comfortable, but something deep inside told him to listen. Naomi, sensing his hesitation, stepped forward. "Tell us what this would look like," she said. Samantha's shoulders eased, and Walter nodded. "First things first, we assess the farm's financial health. See where the money's going, what can be optimized. Then, we look at what resources are available. Government grants, better suppliers, efficiency upgrades." He pointed toward the barns. "For instance, I bet you're spending too much on feed costs." There's a way to cut that down without sacrificing quality. Darius's lips pressed into a tight line. He hated admitting they were right, but damn if they didn't have a point. Samantha spoke up again. And instead of giving you a check, we'd set up a structured, low-interest loan, one that makes sense for you, that helps you expand without drowning you in debt. She held his gaze. This way, you're still in charge. Silence hung between them. Darius clenched his fists at his sides. He wasn't a man who trusted easily, and he sure as hell wasn't the type to let outsiders waltz in and tell him how to run his land, but the truth gnawed at him. He'd been struggling. And what good was pride if it cost him everything he'd worked for? Naomi reached for his hand, squeezing gently. He looked at her, saw the quiet hope in her eyes, the exhaustion beneath it. She wanted better for their family. He did too. Finally, he let out a slow breath. "All right," he said, voice low, measured. "I'll listen." Samantha's smile was small but victorious. "Good," Walter said, clapping him on the back. "Let's get to work." The months that followed were a whirlwind. At first, Darius bristled at the changes, his natural skepticism flaring every time one of the consultants suggested a new approach, but as time went on, he couldn't deny the results. The first thing they tackled was the farm's budgeting. Walter and his team combed through every expense, pinpointing inefficiencies that Darius had never thought to question. They renegotiated contracts with suppliers, cut unnecessary costs, and found government programs that offered subsidies he hadn't even known existed. The most significant change, however, was in how Darius managed production. With the consultant's help, he introduced a rotational grazing system that drastically reduced his feed expenses while improving the health of his livestock. They modernized irrigation techniques, upgraded old machinery through a state-funded program, and even set up a small but promising distribution deal with a local grocer. Slowly but surely, the farm was transforming, not into something unrecognizable, but into a stronger, more sustainable version of itself. And yet, for all the progress, there were still moments of doubt. Late at night, after the girls had gone to bed, Darius would sit on the porch, staring out over the land, wondering if he'd made the right choice. He had spent his whole life doing things the way his father had done before him. Change wasn't easy. Sometimes it felt like he was betraying the legacy left behind. One evening, as the sky burned with the last embers of sunset, Samantha returned to the farm. She hadn't visited in weeks, leaving the consultants to handle the process without interference, but now, as she stepped out of her car, there was a knowing look in her eyes. Darius met her by the barn, arms crossed. "Didn't think I'd see you back here." Samantha smirked. "Figured it was about time to check in on my investment." He let out a dry chuckle. "Investment, huh? Is that what I am?" Her smile softened. "No. You're proof that sometimes people just need the right tools to succeed." She glanced past him, taking in the freshly repaired fences, the healthy cattle grazing in the distance, the tractor that no longer sputtered like it was on its last breath. "I'd say it's working." Darius followed her gaze, exhaling. "Yeah, it is." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Samantha reached into her bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. She handed it to him without a word. He frowned, unfolding it. His breath caught. It was a repayment statement. For the loan she had set up, but across the total balance, in bold red ink, was a single word, paid. His head snapped up. "What the hell is this?" Samantha tucked her hands into her pockets, her expression unreadable. "Call it a final gift." His jaw tightened. "I told you, I don't take handouts." "And you didn't," she said evenly. "You made every single decision. You worked for every improvement. This farm is thriving because of you, Darius. I just sped up the process. And I won't apologize for that." He stared at her, struggling with emotions too tangled to name. Pride, gratitude, frustration, maybe even a little awe. Finally, he let out a breath, shaking his head. "You're one stubborn woman, you know that?" She grinned. "So I've been told." Naomi appeared on the porch then, watching the exchange with quiet understanding. Darius turned the paper over in his hands once more before folding it neatly and tucking it into his pocket. He wasn't sure what to say. What could be said to a woman who had walked into his life on a random afternoon and, without asking for anything in return, had helped change its course forever? So instead he did what felt right. He extended his hand. "Thank you, Samantha." She shook it without hesitation, her grip firm, steady. "Don't thank me," she said. "Just promise me you'll keep this place running." Darius nodded. "You got my word." As Samantha walked back to her car, Darius turned toward his wife, meeting her knowing gaze. Naomi smiled, slipping her arm around his. "I think you finally met someone as stubborn as you," she teased. Darius chuckled, watching as the dust kicked up behind Samantha's departing car. "Yeah," he murmured, "I think I did." The farm was his legacy, built on the sweat of his father's brow and now shaped by his own hands. It had survived storms, hardship, and change, and now, for the first time in a long time, Darius knew it would endure. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.